Productions 10 Presents Biblical God Alien Household, Part 1. Narrated by me, the religious whore, in a production of Nelson Cohen. Before proceeding further with this brief account of early history of Israel, I reflect a little on the enigmatic personality of this strange character who the Bible calls the Lord, and who gives us not only as the leader of the Jews supernatural, but the one God of the universe. Actually, to be the one God of the universe, acts in a fairly strange. If we present as the special God of the Hebrews, something like an excellent spirit was in charge of to lead the Israelites in their perilous journey through the desert, there would be more difficult to admit, even if it means we had to forgive certain flaws quite shocking in an excellent spirit, but not only that, but we want to present as the God of all the cosmos, whose creative power came all the galaxies and under whose government is all the infinity of the universe, then certainly the intelligence violently resists human admit. We can easily imagine God burying a man who has been very important for the people of Israel, however, is a trifle when compared with the millions of men and women who have built up over the millennia the human race. Yahweh means this and is a name that he gave himself. Ask Moses. Example 3.14 His name. It is an answer that you strongly agree with. Superficial answers and somewhat complacent that the aliens now I will give contacted. For many years instead of Yahweh or Yahweh is used the name of the Lord, because the Jews usually do not write more than consonants omitting vowels, and this gave rise to the misconception that the name was Jehovah instead of Yahweh. The consonants of God's name were Y or JH, V or W and H, i.e. YHVH or YHVH. The vowels which were unknown that had to be between these consonants because the Jews avoided pronouncing the name God, get lost. What was his true SSB when tried? It made the mistake of putting the vowel O, giving rise to the name of Jehovah, but in reality did not match the name with which God had called himself. Despite these reasons, and today supported by all scholars of the Bible, the religious sect continues to use the name of the Lord given for this one reasons that are as valid as some of the typical beliefs of the sect. In this and in those you can see clearly confirmed much of the thesis of this book. If the Jehovah's Witnesses fair prophet studied the history of the Adventists, which is likely to discover the true root of their own beliefs. But the religious fervor is not exactly a great encouraging the right use of reason. The Elohim Yahweh is not far from the only name that uses the Bible to describe God. The first name and the most abundant 2,500 times that the Bible uses to describe God is Elohim, which curiously is plural and has come to mean strong or powerful. The plural used by a book whose main purpose is to spread the idea that one must worship God, as opposed to many gods who were in neighboring towns, is something that an unprejudiced observer has to fill with wonder. Both the Genesis and other books of the Pentateuch, we find many facts as amazing as this and yet have always been passed over and taken very lightly by commentators of the Bible. Admittedly they are very uncomfortable verses in their interpretation, and it does not really fit with the teaching that Christianity has held for many centuries. So exegetes and Bible scholars have preferred the long pass or simply ignore them. We, without prejudice, try to stick to what we read in the Bible. For many convoluted and biased interpretations that have wanted to do it an undeniable fact that the Bible begins with these amazing words, Bereshith bara Elohim. In the beginning, the mighty created heaven and earth. We will return to these intriguing words. We do not know how the first meeting of Yahweh with Abraham. We know it was when he lived in Ur of the Chaldees, and when still called Abram, whose name he later was changed to Abraham for the same Lord as to Sarai his wife, Sarah changed it. This detail of the name change is still prevalent in today's contacted. The first time we see the Lord appear in a visible way, as so often did after Moses, and tells us in Genesis, chapter XV, verse 17, it happened because the sun has already appeared in the middle of thick darkness, the smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces sacrificed by Abraham. On that day the Lord has made covenant with Abraham, saying, Unto thy seed have I given this land from the river of Egypt unto the river large Euphrates. The promises and blessings of Yahweh to Abraham did not refer only to his future offspring that would become a great people, but also directed the immediate descendants of Abraham himself, as having reached old age childless Sarah as his wife was barren, and this in the mindset of those patriarchal villages was considered a great misfortune. Yahweh promised then to Abraham that despite his age and his wife have a son, and it did something that is often repeated today, often in people who have been contacted by aliens called, they are very often promising offspring to contact or interfere in family matters. I know a few instances of contacts that apropos of nothing and without that they had made no request to aliens, they said to them in X time, have a son, and often in circumstances that was logical that this would happen. I know a case in which a visitor alien addressing the head of the family told him, pointing to a courtyard inside the house, I see the kids playing there in 2 years. Actually, after 2 years the twins were born in that family, used to play in that little yard. The great proof that the Lord put Abraham was to require the life of his son Isaac, who had been conceived in an almost extraordinary, thanks to the intervention of Yahweh himself. Undoubtedly this request the Lord to Abraham had to be a terrible ordeal, not only because of the life of his son, but it surely had to come to mind great doubts about the goodness and even the sanity of that God sent him things so absurd and contradictory. But this is only the beginning of the mode of action of the Lord that we will see making the strangest things along the entire Pentateuch and the Bible. Abraham passed the test, and this terrible deserved that the Lord will ensure a solemn covenant. He will bless in a special way to all his descendants. Vengeful, pursuing the qualities of Yahweh, we find it too temperamental and vindictive as to be able to recognize in him the God of the cosmos. Moses, as a human he is, has some weaknesses from time to time, and how smart he is allowed to act strange sometimes, their protector. But this, instead of forgiving, as would be logical in an almighty God, she was kept for 40 years, and at the end of them, had the pleasure to teach from a hill, the promised land, but in punishment for his doubts. Not let's get into it. We cannot help, but this smacks us bitterness and revenge, things that detract too much of everything is a creator. Once, tired of people always eat the same food, manna asked Moses to give them meat. Moses told the people's desires to the Lord. Then the Lord's anger was kindled greatly by the request of Moses, and angrily said, For you shall eat meat, because they have wept in the ears of Yahweh, saying that you would meat to eat. Now Yahweh shall give you meat to eat not only a day or 2, or 5, or 20, but you shall eat for a month, until iodine come out at your nostrils and you cause disgust. If this is God, God is undoubtedly a very grouchy Lord. Kept his promise. Wine began to blow. A stranger who came from the sea, and the sky began to darken by the amount of quail that had been over the camp of the Israelites, flying at very low altitude as the Bible says, and fell scattered throughout the countryside. The people were easily collected throughout the day and all night and the next day. The Bible tells us that the least collected received a good amount, and put them to dry, after killing them in the vicinity of the camp. Of course, there were a great feast of meat, such as had been his request to Moses, but we hear the end of the episode as Moses tells us, the book of Numbers 11:33. I still had the meat between their teeth and had not yet finished. The anger of Yahweh was kindled against the people and struck them with a very great plague. And that place was called Hat to Abaquag, because their greedy people buried of meat. Episodes such as this are edifying, and above all, made by the Almighty God, patient, kind and merciful, abound throughout the Pentateuch and in some ways, throughout the Bible. Yahweh commanded human carnage with breathtaking ease, merciless killing, fanatical and totally devoid of justice, humanity and charity, which was not walking or suckling ginners. And not only among the enemies whose sin was to have gone before to that land and be established in it, but against their own people. Moses, seeing the wild people, got to the gate of the camp and shouted, "To me that the Lord met with him and all the sons of Levi. And he said, Thus says the Lord God of Israel, Gird ye every man his sword by his side, and pass through the camp from door to door, killing each to his brother, his friend and his relative." Did the children of Levi had commanded Moses, and perished in that day about 3,000 of the people. And Moses said, Today I have consecrated to the Lord, each one against his son and brother, and thus receive blessing. Acts 32:38. CQ. Such barbarity is commented as follows in a note Strauba in Bishop's Bible. This act of zeal for the glory of God said to a tribe of Levi to be the tribe of the priesthood total, which the Lord commanded Moses, runs and Strauba canonized Bishop Wildest fanaticism. Here's another small piece that belies much of a merciful father, as the Lord liked to be called. When coughing children of Israel were in the desert, met a man who was looking for firewood on the Sabbath. Those who had found it, Moses and Aaron and the whole community, They put him in custody because he was not yet determined what they had to do with it. Yahweh spoke to Moses, "Let that man die," that the whole community stoned outside the camp. The whole community pulled out of the camp and stoned him to death, as Yahweh had commanded Moses. Number 16:32. Demanding. Nor can we imagine the God of the universe so meticulous, ordering until the last details of I's garments of the priests, saying many had to be the fringe. Rather, it gives the impression of a neurotic old maid instructing how you have to place objects in a certain order on the table. And fussy and demanding. Do not offer up anything that has a defect, it will not be accepted at your hands, or should have defects. Animal blind or crippled or maimed or ulcerated, or itchy or stingy shall present themselves before the Lord and not burn anything from them on the altar. Ox or sheep that has a member too long or too short you can present as an offering of voluntary but will not be accepted as fulfillment of vows. Animals with crushed testicles, mahatu, torn or cut, do not yield submit to Yahweh. Nothing received from the hand of a foreigner like to offer it to God, because their offerings are imperfect and as a blemish on them, not be accepted from your hands. Lef. 22:20 at CQ. And besides demanding patriotic, apart from these negative qualities, we see a Lord erratic in how to proceed, or at least short-sighted. The reader can see on the next page a sketch map of the road followed the Israelites from Egypt to the Promised Land. Indeed, that journey was far from being a planning model. The logic is that the Israelites would have followed more or less the broken line as on the seashore, much less inhospitable lands across the barren and harsh Sinai Peninsula, and on the other hand, following this path dotted, would have saved many hundreds of kilometers. But it seems that the Lord took delight in making them spend the whole series of troubles for 40 years, crossing and recrossing the barren and burning plains of the Sinaitic Peninsula. It was not surprising that from time to time, all the people rose up and doubted the wisdom of Moses, though it looked very mysterious orders from this cloud that constantly ran through the desert. When I say I'm being irreverent to the Lord, writing stuff to make it appear ruthless, I will say that I am only quoting what I read in the Bible and trying to interpret it in my head using the logic that people use to judge things this world. If other men in ancient times made comments and more comments to the texts of the Bible, we in our time, having the same texts and taking more or less the same head that they too have a right to make some comments, with the advantage we have much more time to judge the truth or falsity of many of I's prophecies and blessings that we see in the texts. Also, my reaction to the modus operandi of Yahweh is not so crazy when I see that Moses himself sometimes reacts in a similar way. The people uttered bitter complaints to the ears of the Lord in the desert, and the Lord heard him. The turned his anger, and fire of the Lord burned among them, and one end of the camp the children of Israel returned to their cries, saying, "Who will give us flesh to eat?" Is very angry wrath of Yahweh, and Moses felt very bad and told the Lord, "Why do you treat afflicted thy servant? If you're going to treat me like, kill me, please, and not to see more of my misery." Number 11. One jealous of the things that Yahweh was enraged that the Israelites give ear to other gods. There is no denying that he was overzealous and that in many occasions gave tremendous punishment to his people when he was influenced by the peoples they conquered or who was in his way. He admitted one of their gods. Do not bow down to no other god, for Yahweh and called jealous is a jealous God, he said to the Jews. Example 34.14. However, on the other hand, we cannot explain how being so jealous of his honor was in some other occasions as respectful of the rights of the other gods, acknowledging their existence somehow. Curious will copy the text of which I have echoed some other time. The Lord said to Moses, "Behold the rite according to which Aaron enter the shrine. It will take the goats and present them before Yahweh to the entrance to the tent of the meeting shall cast lots upon them to know what to Yahweh and which for Azazel. Aaron shall bring the goat upon which the lot fell for Yahweh, and offer it in sacrifice for the presented alive before the Lord to make atonement, and then let go to Azazel." Lef. Chapter 16. What one cannot explain is that Azazel, as the commentators of the Bible, was a demon who lived in the surrounding desert places. In what appears to Yahweh their rights respected him. To the commentators, as always, there is no problem in the text. Read in the Bible of Jerusalem, the ritual of the release of the goat has an archaic character, and there is no further explanation. The cloud. Yet another interesting aspect in the way of the Lord to act in this enigmatic, its various forms to appear before Moses, which was the most ordinary form of cloud by day and a pillar of fire shining over the night. We quote from the Bible, "Strange clouds, as they have been seen on many occasions." Elias could give us an idea of what it looked like the cloud, when it stopped above the tabernacle. "And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to guide them on the road, and at night in a pillar of fire to give them light so they could go day and night." The column of cloud did not withdraw from the town during the day, nor the pillar of fire by night. Example 13, 20, 22. Strange clouds as they have been seen on many occasions. Elias could give us an idea of what it looked like a cloud, when it stopped above the tabernacle. The references to this mysterious and from the point of view of Mystica, interesting cloud, are very abundant throughout the Pentateuch. Copy of the Book of Numbers chapter IX verse 15. The day that the tabernacle was erected, the cloud covered the tent of purple and rose when the cloud above the shop. The children of Israel broke camp, and in the place where the cloud stopped, the children of Israel encamped. At the command of Yahweh departed the sons of Israel, and the order of the Lord encamped. There were camped every day that the cloud was standing on the tabernacle. If the cloud stopped several days on the tabernacle, the children of Israel fulfilled the ritual of worship of the Lord and journeyed not. However, if the cloud was over the tabernacle only the overnight and morning was taken up, they journeyed. If you were one day and one night and then rose, they journeyed. If, however, stopped on the home 2 days for a month or a year, resting on it, the children of Israel remained in the camp and not set, but rose in the order set off to Lord and campers. The order of the Lord moved the camp. On this rare cloud served as a vehicle to the Lord. One could write many pages. The Pentateuch speaks of her on many occasions and always presented as something very real and visible throughout the town. Naturally, being the abode of Yahweh, this cloud behaved very differently from the others and somehow seemed to have intelligence, and the people he had enormous respect, apart from being the abode of Yahweh, so drastic that it was in their ways with those who adhered to the precepts of Yahweh. Yahweh spoke to Moses after the death of the 2 sons of Aaron, who died of approach inappropriately to Yahweh, i.e. the cloud. The Lord said to Moses, "Tell your brother Aaron that never come into the sanctuary that is behind the veil, before the mercy which is above the ark, lest he die, for I do see in a cloud above the mercy left." 16.1. As we see, came too close to the cloud carries the same risk today. Involves the approach without due caution to a UFO. The radiation in our day have killed the few reckless, seem to have been the causes of death in the sons of Aaron, and for that reason, the Lord tells Aaron to never come into the sanctuary lest he die. And that may well have been also the reason why Yahweh told Moses when he approached while still pastor to see what was the light that was floating in the middle of the bush, "Stay away, and take off the sandals your feet." Example 3.5. But for the reader still has a better idea of this very rare cloud and pervading that it was Yahweh, I will copy another text of the book of Exodus. Among the many who refer to the cloud in the Pentateuch, the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I will introduce myself to you in a thick cloud that the people hear me talk to you and give you credit." And always what we today call motherships, UFO, elongated shape and often of great size. The Romans called beams in the absence of a better term of comparison. The writer of the 16th century, unable to imagine otherwise, captured well what I read in the ancient texts. For it may seem naive illustration of this phenomenon, we can see it, however, the same basic features in the cloud of Moses and the mothership ufology today. How long in fact it coincides with Moses as the one shown as a column that spits fire, glare or flare. The text of this print says a meteor moving from south to north did shine at night like day and a shift in space. The cloud at night looked like a pillar of fire and set in motion. All the people started to I-A order of Yahweh. Make it cleanse today and tomorrow to wash his clothes and be prepared for the 3rd day. For the 3rd day the Lord will descend at the sight of all the people on Mount Sinai. Delimits the contour of the mountain, saying, "Beware of going up the mountain and its slopes even touch, because everyone who touches the mountain will die, but nobody will touch the culprit but it will be stoned or shot, whether man or beast will not be alive." When the horn resonates, then they go up the mountain the 3rd day at daybreak. There was thunder and lightning and a dense cloud on the mountain and a powerful sound of a trumpet, and all the people that were in the camp trembled. Then Moses brought out the people of the camp to meet God, and they stood at the foot of Mount and Mount Sinai was smoking because Yahweh descended upon it in the form of fire and smoke rising from a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. The sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder. Moses spoke and God answered him with thunder. Yahweh came down to Sinai, to the summit of Mount. The Lord called Moses to the summit. Moses ascended the mountain. The Lord said to Moses, "Go down and plot the people, lest they break the boundaries to see the Lord, because many of them die." Example 19:9 ff. is a long text but full of beautiful details to rate this cloud. I refer to only 3 details, safe from what he later said of other aspects that make it even more interesting from the point of view of Mystico. The cloud was making noise. Moses, in the absence of other terms with which to compare the different noises that made the cloud, said that sounded like a trumpet, also noting that responded with thunder to what Moses said, and the whole mountain trembled. The UFO-shaped cloud or balls of light that have been today, it is also very common that make noise, but now we have more terms to compare the noise they make, are rather high or severe tinnitus. Sometimes they produce strong heat from a reactor at low altitude, and most often is usually heard are tremendous explosions. I have witnessed very close to one that make many people believe that the UFO has been damaged or broken, when in fact so. These explosions may well be equated with the thunder of Moses speaking to us. At first glance over, a critically minded reader could be held strange that Yahweh called from a cloud to Moses and that Moses heard, and if the cloud was as loud as it seems. However, in modern cases that we know very well and that basically, in our opinion, are due to the same causes operating in the Sinai, these calls have been verified in such adverse circumstances as those, and in a way that could be the same. In the village of Parabandal, Santander, Spain, between 1961 and 1970 produced a series of appearances from someone claiming to be San Miguel, for girls of the place. On many occasions, when the girls were each in their own home, received what they called prompt, i.e. a kind of internal call that was not only distinctive but urgent, to go up the mountain like Moses, because there was waiting for the angel, and in fact was, when you came, going at high speed each by hand. The vision was at the top of the hill waiting for them. Many contactees have felt the same call to come to the place where the aliens are waiting, and on many occasions the calls were not hallucinations but actually contacted when they reached the place where the quoted, which usually was a remote and lonely, found the UFO landed on Earth. Finally, we have the important details of the prohibition on cutting, that Yahweh does not cross the boundaries and stay away because many of them die. We talked about the deaths of some reckless radiation have come to an uninvited UFO. In this case, the question might be why Moses could do it without suffering any consequences. The question is already answered in part with uninvited. Some humans who have come into UFOs, invited by his crew, have not suffered any harm. Similarly, it may be that Yahweh Moses to prepare especially not suffer the consequences of radiation, and in fact some evidence of this when we read in Exodus 34:29, Moses came down from Mount Sinai, and went up from mountain with the 2 tables in hand, did not know that the skin of his face had become radiant while talking to the Lord. Then, there is something not clearly intelligible, a veil that Moses put over his face after talking with Yahweh, and the chapter ends thus emphasizing the same thing. The children of Israel saw then that Moses' face shone. Many people who have come to a UFO uninvited soon felt that all the skin had been exposed to light from the UFO. They burned, and in particular the face and eyes. I know a few where these people have had to be treated in a hospital, showing a radiation inexplicable in his face, and in some of these cases, the person died because, according to the medical report, an unknown radiation. The categorical prohibition of the Lord's people do not go up the mountain, and not even close, and especially that no one touched to those who have died have gone up, they were men or beasts, is something that also aims to death by radiation. As you can see, the cloud is not something that can be read in passing, but a key piece in this whole puzzle. In a later chapter dwell further on this cloud from the point of view of Mystica, but now I can say that these passages of the Pentateuch are the most interesting and clear that we can find in all the sacred books in which reference is made to UFO. I am sure that you hear for the first time these claims, needs to have her extremely bold and risky. However, for who knows in depth the phenomenon, is absolutely no doubt that the column of Moses was a type of UFO that is seen many times in our day. And there are photographs, both as a column of smoke or cloud by day and night glowing column. I hope you enjoyed the teachings of Nelson and mine. Expect soon the second part. Never believe the lies. Several drug bastards that hallucinating, wrote a horror movie. Because of the stupid people who believe in all fucking pastors and priests as are rich, all of them. Bye bye XDDDDDDDDDD.